It's the top 5 light counter picks in RTA. Number 5 is either Akroma or Jessica. Both of these monsters do similar things. Akroma resists everything, and she also imposes a reduction to critical hits on your opponents. Meanwhile, Jessica just takes all those debuffs and ignores them, but still has them? And then when she attacks, she can apply them to her opponents. And what do both of these have in common? They completely ignore Oblivion, so have fun with that one. For Akroma, I've seen people rune her on Violent or Vampire. I think I'm a bigger fan of Violent than I am of Vamp though. I also do really like her on a Revenge set, so that way you have an additional opportunity to try to increase somebody's cooldown time. For your 2, 4, and 6 slots, you can rune her on Speed, Crit Damage, HP. Don't skimp on the crit rate because you really want her to be doing damage while she's sitting there. Otherwise, she has a tendency to just kind of be a wall of HP for people to get through. Now listen, I have seen some people who think it's funny to rune Akroma on multiple sets of will. It is hilarious, but don't do that. It's a great meme, but like, don't. I mean, unless you're just having fun, in which case I'm not trying to be the fun police. Have your fun, put her on will, but don't. It's silly, don't. Unless you really like it. Jessica's still pretty new on the block for Summoner's War, but people really like her on Despair Revenge, so that way you have a chance to counterattack and apply stun or any of the other debuffs in her arsenal at the time. She does have increased damage as part of her passive, so you don't necessarily want to skimp on the damage. You could try putting her on slot 4 crit damage, crit rate, or attack, and look for additional damage in the substats of your artifacts. I have also heard of people putting her on Nemesis. Now, one thing I want to highlight about her stats, try to get her as close to base resistance as humanly possible, because it makes no sense to run Jessica if she is just going to resist the debuffs that people are trying to apply to her. You also want to be careful about accidentally making her immune to things. So if you're planning on bringing a Wusa, maybe keep him in the monster box for right now and let Jessica have a second to shine. Number 4. The app icon. Artamiel is the Light Archangel, and he has definitely fallen into the zone of counterpicks. While you can no longer really just slam down an Artamiel and win the game, he's still great in certain situations. If you see your opponents pick a bunch of AoE monsters that have some incidental crits, or monsters that are built fully on crit rate, he'll be there to counterattack, strip, and maybe even despair stun people. Couple all that with a heal on skill 2 and a defense buff to even boost his own damage, and you've got a great monster to this day. If you're trying to rune an Artamiel, put him on Despair, so that way you get some clutch little stuns on occasion when he revenges people. You can put him on Defense, Crit Damage, Defense, so that way you get maximum damage scaling, and he can crit. You can find all the speed that you need in your substats, but to be honest, speed is barely a priority for him, because ideally, you'd be bringing Artamiel into comps that just have a lot of AoE with incidental crits, so that way he can punish them. So in a way, Artamiel doesn't really need his own turns, because all the turns he's taking are your enemy's turns. If you want maximum efficiency, try to get him to 100% resistance as well, just so that way it's way harder for your opponents to deal with him. Number 3 is Seimei. Seimei limits the number of turns that harmful effects can be applied to your team, and also the number of turns that buffs can be applied to your enemy. So that means that in the pick ban phase, you can punish people for picking Wusa if they don't know what the skill does. Reading the passive explains the passive. Getting punished for not reading. I feel like I'm in middle school again. Seimei also has this other clause in her passive where she will heal your allies in proportion to the number of debuffs that are on them. So your opponent's going to be put in this spot where they think they're getting the upper hand, but instead they've accidentally healed your entire team. That's crazy. For Seimei's main set, you can put her on a set of Violent runes so she has a chance to proc and reduce the skill cooldown time on her second skill. Though you could also put her on an offset amalgamation that's just a bunch of Nemesis sets and a Will set. But if you wanted to do Violent Will or Violent Nemesis, you wouldn't be wrong for doing that. Speed HP is a good place to start. You need her to be tanky as heck and hopefully resistant as heck too. Just like our previous entry, Seimei does love to be on 100% resistance. Because even though you don't necessarily mind healing your allies, you don't want it to be easy for your enemy to dispatch your Seimei. Look for damage reduction in your substats within the artifacts, and also increased recovery for skill 3 to enhance the healing doled out from her passive. Number 2 is Pontos. Pontos has a third skill that cleanses your entire team, applies 2 turns of invincibility, and then applies immunity that scales in the number of turns equal to the debuffs he cleansed. Now that is the reason why he is one of the most devastating violent procs out of stun in the entire game. This guy can shift a game with that third skill. And if your opponent doesn't have strip, or if their strip is on cooldown, they're gonna have several awkward turns ahead of them. So I'd put him on a set of violent runes. Speed HP, look for speed, tanky stats, and a little bit of accuracy in the substats. Just a couple quick honorable mentions before we get to number 1. First, Kinky, the light Onimusha. Kinky cannot get crit upon, nor can he land crits. And he'll also counterattack if you don't hit him for more than 15% of his total HP. Now, there was a time where Kinky would have been number 1 on this list, but that time has passed. So he's an honorable mention. Our other honorable mention is Huadang. Huadang is kind of like a bank for HP. If an ally on your team would die, he instead gives them some HP. Very cool passive, but he doesn't offer enough on the rest of his kit to really warrant a slot in the top 5. Number 1, Magnum. No, I'm just kidding. I love Magnum. Oh my god. Every game is a Magnum game, baby. No, I'm just kidding. Number 1 is Tian Lang, but you knew that when you clicked on the video, you dirty little rascal. Anytime someone would gain attack bar, instead, they gain significantly less attack bar and Tian Lang takes some. It's kind of like taxes. Actually, it's exactly taxes. God, that's awful. Tian Lang also has incredibly useful skills that you'd want to get to sooner. He's got defense break on skill 1, and he's got a strip and stun on skill 2. Tian Lang loves a violent set. Being able to defense break and then proc into his skill 2 for bigger damage is really beneficial. And he's already getting turns thanks to his passive, so increasing the probability of him getting more turns is always a good thing. You can put him on speed, HP, since his skill 2 scales with HP. Then look for additional damage in his substats to maximize that. Then more accuracy for both of his skills is always good because they're very valuable. Do my 5 look like yours? Let me know in a comment down below and see y'all for the next one.